Okay, so we said something last episode. You said something the last episode. I don't remember it verbatim. I'm just going to say it as I remember it. Be your age. Yeah. And because you had listened to this spiritual leader talk about that.
It's just a man who makes videos about wisdom.
That's right. Man who makes videos about wisdom. He could be a spiritual leader. And
yeah, I think it's a broad, spiritual knowledge is broad and over.
It is.
I just don't think he brands himself as a spiritual leader.
No, which is probably a good thing. Yeah. I would say that actually most really good spiritual leaders don't brand themselves as a spiritual leader.
I agree.
They're just sharing, whatever. And people put, again, we always reference Muji, but he literally doesn't care about the situation he's in. He stated this publicly so much since the very beginning. He's like, he says, I literally just go within and he calls Source Father within himself because he has a Christian upbringing. And he's like, I used to say, Father, they're coming to listen to me and I don't know what to tell them. Help me. Give me words of wisdom. And he's just the channel. So anyway, because today is my solar return. Of course, I'm going to bring it up. It's June 11th.
Yeah, of course.
And, and I'm at the 55 speed limit.
The speed limit.
I reached the speed limit. And some people will, and then, in some places the speed limit is 65. And people are like, no, that would be 55, the American speed limit, the classic one. Because this body is now 55. And my mind goes to, okay, so what does 55, what does being in your 50s mean? Well, it's different now. I mean, when my grandparents were in their 50s, they were old. They were really old. And they acted old because that's what they learned. That's what was expected. It was the mental programming. It was the mindset.
Can I offer an interpretation that I have I thought about in regards to this sort of act your age thing?
Yeah.
Because I think that societally we do a very typical thing, and I think that we generalize. But I think that wisdom is like, and I said this before, some of the best wisdom I've ever heard. I said this in the context of spiritual wisdom. It's just when people say things that are very broad, but it's about how they apply to you as a person. So when it comes to a sentiment like the idea of acting your age, I don't think that there's any one standard that is set societally for like how somebody should act of their age. I think the phrase act your age is how long have you been here and what have you experienced versus what haven't you experienced? And based on what you have experienced and what you haven't experienced, you're going to build up an idea of what works for you and what doesn't. So the older you are, the more focused you are about just doing what works for you versus like a young person who hasn't experienced a lot might go out, drink for a while because they haven't done that, So that's where I feel act your age really comes into play. It's a specific thing. It's about you. It's not about like other people who are like 55 do this thing or like other people who are like 80 do
of
this,
course. That I totally comprehend. What my perspective is there's a societal mindset about aging and about what and thank you for defining that for me. Act your age is I think what he said, and I was saying be your age. Act your age, and it's all different now. And of course, it just depends on the person. And my mind connected that with what you had said in the last episode to what we were talking about in the car when we were on our way back from Central Oregon in the hot springs. Is we're talking about we as people, as a family, but just also as individuals, we really enjoy living life to a fuller experience, it seems, than a lot of people. And, no, we're not out there bungee jumping. We're not skydivers, although it could be interesting to do that.
I want to skydive.
Sure, of course you do. I totally get that. If I had the opportunity to skydive and it just aligned, I would do it. If it was just presented to me, just like taking psychedelics wasn't anything that I planned. It was literally just handed to me. Just like investing in the Essence of Energy Center in Roseburg with the EE system. It was just handed to me. Life will align these things for you so that you can fulfill your greater purpose on this planet. And skydiving can be somebody's greater purpose on this planet, which is like to overcome like some of the greatest fears through skydiving. Some people need that. Mm-hmm. I personally don't. I'm sure my body would just be like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I think it's all about what you want, because it's not as though there's like some force external to you that is presenting things in life to you. And this is something that I really put to words today. Nothing in life is without reason. So everything is an action that you take. And actually, this is what we're taught. Like when we come into this space, in this physical space, right? We're manifestors. We're here to create. And the thing that you learn as you get older is that means you have to create every step of the way, which is why usually the bigger manifestations, the ones that are like kind of more distant to where a person is here and now, they require more work. They require more action to be taken in order to actually bring the thing to you. It's not usually something that just shows up. You have to like kind of visualize what it is that you want. And you do that either intentionally, consistently, or you do it unintentionally based on just kind of aligning with experiences that aren't quite what it is that you want, and then thinking, oh, but it could be better if I had it this way, and then you leave those experiences. So, for example, with the EE Center for you had a lot of experiences. You've always wanted something like that. You've had a lot of experiences where I've
wanted healing centers and wellness centers, and the EE system, the energy enhancement system, is just like big.
Exactly.
It's like bigger than I ever imagined.
If you think, well, I would say not quite.
No, it's bigger than I ever imagined.
I think that it's probably bigger than your ego imagined, but the higher self, the higher self is the one who's in control of all this.
The higher self is already there with that.
So this is what I'm talking about. Is it's you. You brought that to yourself. And
so, one of the things I want to interject here, it's so interesting because we can talk about what the higher self, which I now call the inner self because it's all within. The higher inner self has this intention, has an intention for the life of how much you can love yourself more, how much more experience you can have, how much more knowledge can you gain, how much more can you expand. And then there's the ego intention. And I probably would say that I have aligned my ego intention with my higher inner self intention more in my life than not.
Yeah, I think that's, if you feel as though you're constantly growing and changing and overcoming experience, that is by definition what is happening. But I thought about this too, actually. I don't like the term higher self, although I use it because
I know, because people know
the term higher self. No, it's because when you say higher self, what you're actually saying is self without.
Self without, something above you, but why I changed it to inner self.
You actually are, you are your higher self.
It's within.
The higher self is a conscious decision. It is not something that is greater than you. It is not outside of you. No. If you say higher self, what you're saying is my ego is in control.
You are, and even though I had QHHT sessions before I ever did psychedelics in 2020, because 2021, as you know, was the only year I did psychedelics. I mean, I don't count cannabis in high school, but I did. But I would say that my QHHT sessions, when you have QHHT and Beyond Quantum Healing BQH, you are going within, deep down into the cells, deep down. When I've had 13 sessions, I never went above or without or anything. I went deep, deep, deep within, and there it was. It was all there. It was all there. And the same thing with psychedelics. With psychedelics, there was nothing outside of myself. All the psychedelics that I took all showed me, oh my God. The first realization I had doing DMT from Akasha bark was the ego is so silly. We're the ones who are doing all of this. It's us. And then I saw the grid coming out of my solar plexus chakra, literally out. The matrix comes from the internal.
Yeah.
And I literally saw it. I felt it. I experienced it. And every single journey that I took, which was 5, each one of them within. Oh, okay. What is it? What is it that I'm doing that's inhibiting myself? What do I need to let go of?
Yeah, and it's always the ego, because the thing is, the ego is a limiter. The ego is the obstacle. The ego is the roadblock.
Yeah.
The ego does not actually desire for you to achieve greatness outside of yourself.
That's not true.
Because the ego is afraid of the greatness of the self.
I cannot align with that statement. I have been there at times, but I cannot say that I'm at that place anymore.
Well, but I'm not. See, this is what I'm saying though. Is
my ego is aligned with my inner purpose.
It just means that you're not listening to your ego.
No, I don't agree
in the
with
same
you.
way that you would be
I don't
listening
agree.
to
I
the
really
higher
feel
self.
like my ego is quieted down so much.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
It's quieted down so
That's
much.
exactly what I'm saying.
Okay, we're just talking. We're saying it in different ways, but okay, like last Thursday, because now I work at the center in Roseburg, and I was really tired. I was upgrading. I was really tired and had a lot of discomfort, left side blockages, and there was like a half an hour of quiet there where I didn't need to do anything immediately. And Karina is our wonderful manager. And I said to her, I'm going and I got to lie down. I said, I've got all this discomfort. She goes, oh, go. So I went and I laid down right next to one of the columns with the panels and laid there and felt tingling. I don't usually feel tingling anymore. I've aligned with it, but it clearly was out of balance. So I felt tingling. I'm lying there in the zero gravity chair, and I just asked very quietly within, how can I balance myself? And it just comes up right from the whole center. You're doing too much. Stop doing so much. Be open to receive. You don't need to do so much. You're blocking everything from coming in by doing. And I heard, I didn't hear a reference to any consciousness or anything or anyone. What I heard is understandable that you feel that you want to do so much. Pull back, relax, breathe, go slower, slow down. That's what I hear.
Yeah.
And then I said within myself, I get it, but bills still have to be paid.
That's the ego.
That is the ego.
That's the ego right there.
Well,
yeah.
and so just listen. So I was like, well, bills still have to be paid and I still have to do all this. And I heard bills are already paid. Just be open to receive the abundance. All the abundance is here for you. Don't block it by overdoing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Relax, have fun.
Yeah.
And just allow it to happen.
But
and so I did.
so
I was there for the rest of the day and for the night, and I just practiced that.
That's how the ego is always presenting itself, though, as the roadblock. The ego is always saying, because underneath that is, I fear that if I don't work, my bills won't be paid.
Sure. And I recognized that. The
ego is always going to give you fear. It's always going to give you some, I don't think I can do it. I don't think I'm good enough. And what it comes down to is actually, that is a lie. Because the ego never thinks that when you question it and you're like, oh, so you don't think you're good enough, the ego will always come back with, well, no, I think I'm good for what I can do right now. So the ego actually doesn't want to feel low about itself. What the ego wants is it wants to stay in a place where it's comfortable.
Yes.
And so this is where it's like, comfortability is sort of the enemy of achieving this balance within yourself, which is why true balance is not derived from seeking pleasure, and true passion and true life fulfillment is not derived from seeking pleasure. It's derived from overcoming obstacles, and the obstacles are within. And so you journey through within, you overcome the obstacles as they present themselves. You start to accept pain as just an aspect of life. And when you accept pain as an aspect of life, you come into alignment with more of a balance. You stop seeking pleasure.
The balance comes in, and there's this like settling in the now. There's this settling in the moment of, I'm good.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what I'm experiencing. Everything is flowing.
Yeah.
Everything is really good. I would say when we come into a higher consciousness and the ego is very obvious and we realize it, it doesn't go away. You just realize it and you choose to focus on now. And there is this wider perspective that just comes on board. This is my experience. There's a wider perspective that comes on board.
I feel this too.
And I'm able to see my patterns very easily. And there's this just kind of grounding, calming, self-assuredness. A knowledge comes in of, we're just in the low, we're in the dip down of the wave, and the upswing of the wave will come, and then the downswing of the wave will come, and notice the patterns. And then it's very simple for me to recognize the patterns that others have.
Yeah.
You can see it right away, especially people that are close in your life. And it's like and so when people will ask me, I've had a couple of friends recently that I had some phone calls with who were, saying, well, this is still going on. I'm still doing this and I'm not quite sure why. And I said, you're in a loop. It feels that way. I said, no, it is that way. You're in a loop because I've known you for years, and this is the exact same pattern that you've been repeating since we met way back, a long time ago. Yeah. And I said, so what is it that you're still not learning about yourself with this situation that your inner self wants to learn?
Yeah.
Because that's why it's repeating.
I have a really good example of this morning. I kind of go through this always, but this morning I just had one where I was just sort of hit all of a sudden with this just like image of like extreme violence, and it kind of haunts me a little bit, or it did, because that's kind of the ego talking, because the ego represents that fear of repercussion. And so it's so interesting because I heard an amazing quote. I heard an amazing quote from somebody, and they said, somebody asked them like, basically like, it was a specific question, but how to overcome like an obstacle. And they were like, find what you don't like, whatever you don't like, go to it, ask it what its medicine is. And I was like, whew. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
Ask what the answer is. What is the answer?
And I was like, that applies to everything. It's always, in every situation, whenever you want to overcome anything, it's always, what don't you like about it? Go to what you don't like. Because you never want to go to, the ego doesn't want to go to what it doesn't like.
Right.
The ego wants to push away. It wants to say, no, I hate that. Get that away from me. I can't be that. I can't integrate that. That's not a part of me. I don't agree with that. I hate it.
What's really interesting is that what's so funny is that the ego will be so attracted to the lesson.
Yeah.
There's the honeymoon phase.
Well, you are attracted to the lesson.
You're attracted to the lesson,
you.
But the ego at first will see it with the rose-colored glasses. It doesn't matter what sign you are. The ego is just like, oh my gosh, isn't he or she so beautiful? Or, oh, I just want that animal. And then the animal turns out to be vicious after, like 6 weeks, or, it's whatever the lesson is. The ego will almost get duped by the inner self to be attracted to it so that she'll see it.
That absolutely is it. And it's so funny because it's like your lessons will, if you are somebody who has like a really strong ego, and if your ego is like kind of harder to teach, life will actually it'll kind of do like a layer of sugar just to entice the ego, and then it'll put the lesson underneath the layer of sugar.
That's the rose-colored glasses.
No, that's exactly what I'm saying.
The icing on the cake. I'm going to put something so tasty up here, and I'm going to make it look like the most beautiful marzipan.
Absolutely.
And inside is blood.
I've had that happen to me a lot too, and a lot of people do, honestly, because especially as we evolve more as humans, our egos tend to develop more, and we get a little bit more hard-headed. But so I was having this sort of vision, and I thought about that, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. So I asked it, and it's so interesting because I had I had in this vision, it was of a man being tortured, and it's very, very grotesque. And it's so funny because it's the pain of that individual is something that it's like I put myself in those shoes, and then that's like where the fear comes from, is it's like what if I end up that way? Like I don't want to end up like, I'm afraid of people's maliciousness. Like I'm afraid. And basically what I asked is, I was like, what is your medicine? And the guy, like in this vision in my head, the guy who technically couldn't speak because he was mutilated, put his hands down and stood up, and he was like, be yourself. And I was like, oh, be myself. Like, what does that mean? Oh, because what I'm really fearing is I'm fearing people's reaction to the real me. I'm fearing really being myself because I'm afraid that people will respond to me with viciousness. I'm afraid that people won't accept who it is that I really am.
And in quantum healing, and I'll speak in real time, in parallel lives, that's you.
Mm-hmm.
That's you doing that to you. That's you doing that to you through archetypes
Sure.
of others. And in this life, you're getting the feedback through of that. And that is also the Saturn and Aries in the first house for you too. Mm-hmm. That is learning how to discipline, because Saturn is discipline, the restriction of the vision and stepping forward. And Aries is the bully.
Yeah, and I've also heard it interpreted in the opposite, which also works the exact same way, which is that Aries wants freedom, but Saturn dominates and controls.
Yep, and you can look at it that way as well. And I really feel that they're both true. I'm also born under Saturn and Aries, and I've experienced both.
Yeah.
And they square my moon in Capricorn. They square my Mercury in Cancer. It's something that I've experienced within myself. What I've learned with that is to completely accept that, because I have these visions of horrific stuff. Mm-hmm. I've had visions of horrific stuff since I was a teenager. It used to freak me out. I've literally trained my mind in the last, I would say, 5 years, as it'll just flash up all of a sudden, just flash. Mm-hmm. And it's just, I observe it, I accept it. It's a part of the shadow. I completely accept it. It's just normal. It's just a part of me. It's just part of what makes me human. It's not something I would ever act on. It's something that I literally just observe like I'm watching a movie. And it no longer holds this depth of emotion for me. It is emotionless now. Has no charge, no emotion. I will just literally see like a child being mutilated. As a parent, that's a vision that came on when I had you. Mm-hmm. A lot of it's hormones, to be honest with you. But when you're in postpartum, you will see sometimes horrible things in your mind happening to babies and children. And it's something that you will fear that will happen to your own child. And it can be really awful. I mean, there are women, as you already know, in postpartum that can go into psychotic episodes if their hormones are really severely imbalanced. I, of course, had a really good diet, so that helped because my chemistry was a lot better. But I've learned to accept that as just a shadow expression of what am I learning from this?
The hard thing for me has always been like, and I think that this is just got to be one of the more difficult things to do, because we have the I have a natural repulsion inside myself to these sorts of like horrific things. It's a product of empathy, and I would say that survivalistic empathy and fear are very closely related.
Yes,
because to be concerned for something prematurely is to you know, if you're concerned for someone else's situation, if you're concerned for someone else being hurt, that's a survival instinct to protect yourself, because you wouldn't want to be them. And so that's kind of, and I feel that a lot. And it's so interesting because when I came to this realization, it was like, and then the guy in my vision, like, you know, it's, and then his tormentors too. And then it's like I had this vision of like hugging them, and I was like, wow.
You're hugging your own fear.
Absolutely.
They're archetypes of your fear.
And so I approach everything this way now, where it's when you are running into something and you're really struggling with it, you go to the thing that you don't like and you ask it what its medicine is.
You do. And then you create a really amazing life through that.
Yeah.
Because that's what we were originally talking about, is how do you create this life that you want? Your soul is called to go to the furthest lengths for many of us. Not everybody. For some people, they're called to have a life where they have stability and family and all of that. And for some of us, it's going to these huge, epic places and doing big things. For me, this is a big life. This is a life for me to help a lot of people, to help animals. Right now, we're rescuing a cat. To connect with as many people as possible and make great ripples of positive change in the human collective. And how we do that, because I do have that similar darkness, and that dark is literally just a mental representation of the fear of taking action on it.
Absolutely.
Again, a Saturn and Aries
Absolutely.
thing. And I take action on that. How do I do that? I recognize that darkness. I recognize dark images, and I go, it's okay. We're going to take those dark images with us, and we're going to make the change that we need to make. And we're going to connect with people, and we're going to take those chances, and we're going to create the intimacy for ourselves and for others that we really desire to see in this world. And that takes first of all, that takes recognizing your fear and accepting it.
Absolutely.
And then taking action, even if you're feeling that fear. I had a lot of fear moving to South America. I didn't speak the language. I've never been to Peru. And I took 2 out of 3 of you with me. We did it because it was the next step. It was an epic adventure. And I really just wanted to make change in my life. I wanted to learn something new. Mm-hmm. So it's absolutely essential that we do this, that we learn something new about ourselves all the time. Accept the fears. Mm-hmm. Know that it's a normal part of being human and stepping outside of your comfort zone. I feel like the fear, when you recognize it as really what it is, it's a catalyst for making change. That's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.